On your ballot this fall will be Proposition CC, which will be, an end to TABOR and all your refunds in the future. That's a taxpayer bill of rights. Mario Nicholais writes for the Colorado Sun. You're so fancy. It's a digital paper. You don't even have to waste any paper. My friend, my colleague on KHOW, good to see you, Mr. Ross.
It's good to
Kaminsky.
be here.
Is it with an I or a Y?
It's a Y.
Pretty sure it's an I. I'm pretty sure it's an I.
Whatever you say.
All right, you guys have been around for a long time. Let me start over here. Why does the Taxpayer Bill of Rights matter? As a political observer and a junkie yourself, why does it matter here in Colorado?
To me, I often get people saying we don't want to turn into California. To me, the real thing is we should look at Connecticut. We don't want to turn into Connecticut. And we'll go into the details of Connecticut more. Let's just say it is a complete mess. And it is TABOR that keeps us from turning into a state like that, with budgets and the power of government getting out of control. And like you, I'm really worried right now.
I'm concerned as well. Mario?
I think it's because TABOR has been the defining political policy of the past 25 years. Nothing has had more influence in Colorado and politics than TABOR. For instance, right now it's the thing that reins in a progressive lurch to the left, because they can't just willy-nilly raise taxes. Do away with it, and they will. I think that's what you're really seeing right now is the attack on TABOR that's really been started since almost before it ever came up is finally being fulfilled, and I think they've gotten to the point where they think the siege has happened.
Well, let me put it a different way. That they have eaten out what makes the Taxpayer Bill of Rights important. They've done it with rulings from the state bench over and over again. You don't have to go to the people and ask their permission if you call a tax increase a fee. You don't have to ask to go and get debt if you call it a certificate of participation. And the other part that's really happened is the legislature has learned how to get around it by putting more into that enterprise fund, what are fees. So it used to be when TABOR was started, about those fees, those enterprise funds were about a third of the entire state budget. And what the legislature controlled was about 2/3, roughly. That is now completely switched. Now, because they want to get around TABOR, they don't want to ask for consent. Most of our budget is now unaccounted. We do not have taxation with representation because our legislators said, call the hospital fee a fee, call the faster fee a fee, the mill levy fee is a fee, and we'll just get around it. So there's not much there left. The one thing that we still have, though, is those refunds, which have saved our bacon in the past, and now they want them gone forever. Do you think people understand what that refund mechanism is?
Not very well. I think, we live in a world of people who tend to pay a lot of attention to politics and watch your show or listen to my show and read your articles and are pretty well informed. I don't think most of Colorado is that way. And I think that in order to beat Proposition CC, especially because it'll be worded in a way on the ballot that says it's not a tax increase, is going to require a massive educational effort from all of us and from people better known than us. Governor Bill Owens has been quite strong coming out against Proposition CC. It's going to be a big effort.
I think about the folks who helped with Ref C over a decade ago, 15 years ago, and you had the Denver Post working for it. You had the president of CU, Hank Brown, working overtime for it. You had Bill Owens working for it. You had the Grand Junction Sentinel working for it. All of them are on the other side of this. When the Denver Post says the state doesn't have a fiscal crisis, maybe we ought to pay attention.
Sure. And I mean, I think it's one of those things when you look at how much the budget has grown over that period of time, too. I mean, it's something like almost 3 times as large as it was at that point in time.
3 times.
And it's amazing that you see that. I don't think the people of Colorado understand it. And I think that the way they drafted this language, where it's like, oh, we want to spend it on education, transportation, almost like if you do not agree, you are anti-child, and you would also like people to crash and burn on the highways. And it was a smart way to draft it, but I think that's what people get focused on. not realizing that this is actually a political power grab.
Probably worth clarifying that, because there's two things. There's the language of the bill of what everything happens, and then there's the little description that goes on your ballot. That's called the ballot title.
Right.
Now, by the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, it would have to have a very specific title if it went through a citizens' initiative process. But because it went through the legislature, they wrote up this ballot title that makes it seem like sunshine and apple pie and for the children without a tax increase. Shall we just make the world a better place? But those people who are looking at it, I mean, even the governor seemed to be somewhat lukewarm on this.
You know, if I could add on to something that Mario started, and this is a little bit unfair to the Democrats, but I'd like to argue something called facts. I'd like to bring facts to this. And I'm a numbers guy, right? So can I just share with you a couple numbers? I did a little homework, and I just looked at a 1-decade span from the last year's budget to 10 years before. So in fiscal 08-09, our budget was $18.6 billion. There were about 5 million people in the state, so it was about $3,700 a person is what government was spending. 1 decade later, the budget's $30.6 billion. The population only grew to 5.75 million, so spending per person, which I think is an interesting way to think about it, went up to $5,300 from $3,700. It is just an unbelievable increase. And in your own life, in your own real world, have you actually increased per person spending on everything by 45%? It's out of control. We do not need more money in this government.
The other side of that is the tax part of it. We're undertaxed. You know, compare us, we're 49th in this and 49th in that. It's interesting. My wallet doesn't know the difference between a local tax and a state tax. And it's true, our state taxes compared to other states is relatively lower, but our local taxes, our property taxes, our sales taxes are extremely high. And in fact, when you put them together, the Tax Foundation says we're about 20th in the nation for total taxation. We're not undertaxed. How are they going to sell this?
Well, I think they're going to sell it exactly like we've talked about, is with sunshine and promises and maybe a little bit of we're in this horrible situation now. Our schools are terrible, and we've got to fix them. We need this money to do that. We've been horribly underfunded. I think that's exactly what they're going to do. Is they're going to say, look, this is really just making sure that we can make sure the kids get the money, or make sure that the highways get built the way that we want them to be built, and really ignoring that this has longer term ramifications than that. And it's really an undercut of TABOR.
Yeah, you really hit it there with the forever aspect of this. When Ref C came out back in 2005, it said, we're going to take all the excess revenues that would have been refunded back to you, the people, and we're going to keep it for 5 years. And we're also going to raise the base, which is now costing us over $2 billion a year because it keeps growing and growing and growing. But they said, we're going to do this for 5 years, and then we're going to reset the base. This blows that out. It doesn't matter. We will always take any excess revenue. We forget that in the recession of 2000, 2001, it was because we gave that money back to where it came from taxpayers. Our budget was relatively lean. Other states like California fell off a fiscal cliff because they got used to spending that money. I don't care what side you are on spending and taxation, this is reckless. It's not like they're going to take that extra money and put it in a safety fund for when there's a recession. When a recession comes, it is going to destroy the state budget. Programs will be ripped. You thought that the negative factor was bad back in 2009 when the Great Recession hit. It'll be nothing compared to that.
Well, you know what politicians do all the time is they'll take the best year in terms of best and most money into government, which you and I might consider a bad year, but the most money into government, and then they'll use that as the baseline. And I don't just mean it for accounting purposes. I mean the way they really live in their brains. They have a very hard time imagining that there won't be more money next year. But this year would be, if this doesn't pass, the first year in a while that we get a TABOR refund, and it would be a big TABOR refund potentially this year. They're talking about this thing costing close to $1.5 billion over the first 3 years. And
that's our money that we have overpaid.
That we have overpaid in taxes. Now, and I want to come back to the Big Rock Candy Mountain and unicorns and happy part of this. There's a very clever part of the drafting of this. they say they are going to set up this separate fund, a separate exempt general fund, I believe they call it. And they're going to put all the refunds in that. And then they're going to have an auditor say, that, look, they are really spending all the money on K through 12, higher ed, and roads. There is nothing in this that says that they can't cut spending on K through 12, higher ed, and roads out of the regular general fund and backfill with this and just use this as a tax increase for anything they want.
The person you need to talk to on that to prove it is Senator Hank Brown, who was so crucial to getting Ref C passed. He was promised that a third of that was going to go into higher education. And just as you said, he said, where's the money? A third of it was supposed to go. And the auditor said, yeah, it went right there to education or to higher education. Oh, here's the same amount we pulled out before it got refilled. But so your level was flat. And by the way, this is going to be forever.
Right. I mean, I think, so a couple of things. One of the things I want to say is I think Ross has it wrong about they can't imagine it. They just don't care about it. They don't care if it goes up because they figure, oh, well, we'll just come up with more money or we'll come up with another way to fund this. It'll never be a problem. But I mean, I think, you have to frame this in a way that people understand. So it's like what they're trying to do and what people have to realize is if you go to your local Starbucks every day and you get a $4.50 cup of coffee and you give them a $5, you expect 50 cents back. If they just keep it and say, oh, well, we're keeping it so to make sure that everyone else's coffee is good, you'd kind of get a little bit upset. And I think that's where people need to be here, is that this is an artificial tax increase. It's a backdoor tax increase to keep the refunds that we're due.
Here, and not to get too wildly wonky, one of the reasons that we need that money back is we are overpaying because of the Donald Trump tax cuts. And it's a little confusing. I'll take a quick shot at it, which is our state income taxes are based on our federal gross adjusted income. The bottom of the line on the first page of your tax form, you take that, you put it on your state taxes, you multiply it by 4.63. On the federal side, now the tax changes make that number really much larger. That's okay because they use a much smaller tax rate to it, but we're using the same tax rate here to a much larger number. We are flooded with money. Not this last legislation, but the last legislative session before that, there was a bill to change our tax rate to adjust for that. Didn't get out of committee because they want it all. So we're paying more because of fees that are tax increases, and we're paying more because of the Donald Trump tax cut. We're the only state that didn't get a Donald Trump tax cut because we've got to pay more there. I think people will figure it out. What's the Sun going to do on it?
I think the Sun's just going to report on it. I tell you, I think the staff there does a fantastic job about it. They do let me write about it, so I get my positions out there. I think they're pretty fair. But I think it'll just come down to the good arguments we get out.
We got to wrap this up. Thank you, Maria. Maria, I like that. You can be Maria. It's very fluid these days. Ross, thank you. Listen for me on his station when he's not in. I'm Jon Caldara. Check out the Independence Institute. We'll see you next week.